Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Triangulation is brought to you by Cachefly at CACHEFLY.com. It's time for Triangulation, one of the special things we do whenever we can. Tom and Merritt and I like to get together with big minds and talk about big things. And boy, I can't think of anybody better to have in today, given what's going on in the world of the internet, whether it's net neutrality, peering battles, IPv4 and IPv6, than an old friend. In fact, he brought with it with him and gave to me the Screensavers video. You remember these? Video
I've got a couple of those, yeah.
Of his appearance on the Screensavers in 2003. Dane Jasper, welcome to the Twit Cottage. Nice to see you.
Thanks, Leo. It's great to see you.
So Dane runs an internet service provider. Are you former president of the California Independent Internet Service Providers?
Yep,
he's an independent internet service provider called SonicNet. What regions does Sonic serve?
Most of California. We have a couple different networks, but today we cover about 80% of California. Wow. with the legacy products.
That's really cool. Like DSL.
Yes, and
but what's the
new
future?
Stuff, yeah, the new stuff is more limited, and the new stuff is available to about 50% of households in the Greater Bay Area at this point.
And what's the new stuff?
Well, we're going to get to that. But there's such a great
that.
story about how Dane got into this business. I kind of like to start with some history, if you don't mind.
Sure, yeah.
There's a lot to talk about,
Always
so
good to
we'll
reminisce.
move class.
With full disclosure, Leo and I both have been customers of SonicNet.
Have you? I didn't know that.
Yeah, SonicNet was my DSL provider and I was telling this sad story until I outgrew 1.5 megabits and I was too far from the CO. And there wasn't anything like
I had ISDN for a while. Would it have been from Sonic or would it have been through somebody else? Yeah, here in Petaluma.
We still have customers on ISDN, believe it or not.
I'm sorry, I shouldn't. We have ISDN here for the radio, but this was 128 kilobits of bandwidth, twice modem speed.
I'm astounded we still have people dialing up.
That is, yeah. How many? What percentage of your customers?
4,000 dial-up customers.
So it's a small percentage still, but
it's
who are these people? Is the question, right?
It's a very strange thing.
So I guess a good place to start would be that you have your license in your car says Linux. Why is that?
Well, we founded the business in 1994.
Wait a minute. So you became an internet service provider in 94?
1994.
Really? Was there anybody? I mean, who wanted internet?
It was early days. That was the web was in like
were you
gray
offering
and
PPP
black and
slip?
We were, yeah. So it was
trumpet windsuck.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh.
Yeah. We should explain because Windows 95 did not support networking, internet networking. You had to actually run additional software, Trumpet Windsuck, to give you that capability.
I have nightmare recollections of these awful stacks you had to jam to these old Windows machines. So in about 1992, myself and my co-founder Scott Doty were at the Santa Rosa JC, which was the first community college in California to get an internet connection, 56K ADN line, and one of our jobs was to hook up all the labs, hook up all the faculty systems, and students want to get online with dial-up, and so this is dial-up Unix shell. Very early access product, and it was sort of down to BSD or Linux. And at the time, Linux was 0.92c.
Yeah. I mean, it was written in 92, right?
Yeah, so like 2 weeks prior, it had gotten an Ethernet driver for one Ethernet card, the Western Digital 8003, and, coaxial thin-net cable and all. And it looked like Linux was going places, so we decided to do it with Linux. And we set up a dial-up system for students. I think it had about 14 phone lines, 2,400 baud modems. People would call in and do Usenet and email and FTP to Sunsite and download swimsuit pictures or whatever.
And Tin and
all those things,
yeah. Lynx browser.
But before Mutt. Elm and Pine. And what we found out was we did an audit, and we found we got complaints. So I should back up. We got complaints about people's behavior on IRC. And
that's still happening right now.
Really?
At
People
this very
act
moment.
poorly on IRC.
Well, that was a
shock.
little odd at the time because the internet was it was a much more gentle place.
Yeah.
And so we found that we had students apparently who were being rude on IRC, and they were upsetting people at other institutions. And we got these complaints, and it was a kid named Max something or other, and we compared the account creation.
His name will live on.
Oh, yeah. We compared the account creation information with the actual account. So we look at the Social Security number and the student records, and it was like Doris something or other, who was an 82-year-old grandmother taking aqua aerobics. And we didn't think she was Max. The names didn't match.
You
and
guys,
can't imagine her, on
I'm
the
gonna
IRC.
grief you.
And so we found a lot of this, and it turned out that what was happening was kind of early identity theft.
Wow.
A student employee would make a note of somebody's SSN and birth date, and then what I heard was they were getting sold at the high school next door for $25.
Oh, that's hysterical.
And then you would use this to sign up for dial-up access through the system we had built. And the fact that there was a black market for this product convinced me that I needed to start a business. So we took our experience of a couple years with Linux and at the college building this system, and we turned that into a private enterprise.
That is pretty impressive. And running on Linux boxes.
Yeah, Linux from the start, hundreds of them now.
Yeah.
Well, and you got in early on Linux. So what led you to choose Linux when it had just had an Ethernet
Any
driver?
sensible person would have chosen
was it the idea of like, I love the idea of a free operating system and I want to help it advance, or
Well,
He knew that he wanted this license plate. That's why. That's exactly why.
oh, you found a picture of my car. Leo is.
Whenever he's driving around, I love seeing.
So many-
you always know when Dane's coming
so
through
many
town.
talents there. I think we looked at BSD, we looked at Linux, and BSD was a little more mature, and nobody was doing anything. No one was talking about it. And Linux was really actively being developed, and everybody was excited about it and talking about it. And people were writing drivers for Ethernet cards. And so we decided that we really wanted to adopt the platform that looked like it had a lot of
because free
excitement
BSD
about it.
would have been the more sure bet at the time, but you were identifying that there's a lot more going on. So if we do need more out of it, there's more of a chance of getting it out of this community over that one.
That was the idea.
Okay.
Yes. And it was kind of a coin flip, I think.
Yeah.
I think
Well, you got the right side
it
of the
ended
coin.
up being a great choice for us. And that's a big part of the success of the business was using free software, open source, to build a platform that's been successful.
So you glad you got in the internet service provider business, or are you deeply regretting it?
Well, it's had its ups and downs.
Yeah, no kidding.
And
Most of what's interesting is almost everybody, including CRL. We were talking about my first internet service provider with Jim Couch, got bought. He got bought by who was it that was buying everybody up? I want to say Verity or something like
Vario.
that. Vario.
That's right, Vario.
And
Who got bought by NTT.
right. It was massive consolidation. How did you stay independent? I mean, why did you stay independent? I'm sure people came at you with money.
They did. They always came with mostly stock in something that was pre-IPO and some money. And then in hindsight, it was really a good thing we didn't take those deals. But before the California ISP Association, there was I can't even remember what we called it, the California Independent ISP Owner something or other. And we'd get together once a month and have lunch around the Bay Area. And, 7 or 8 of us would get together every month. And gradually in the late 90s, everybody sold.
Right.
And so I don't have any peers from the late 90s
Left.
that I am really in touch with that are still doing what we're doing,
Right.
let alone growing at the scale we're growing at. So we're in an odd place.
There's an opportunity now. I think we can start talking about the future now. But there's an opportunity now. We had last week, we had Bob Frankston. You remember, of course, the guy who invented VisiCalc. And he was a Microsoft Research Fellow for a while. He was the guy who put NAT in routers. You could thank him. I don't think you ever wanted to, but you could thank him for not being able to charge each and every individual in a household as opposed to the whole household itself. But one of the things he's kind of lobbying for, he says there's a rare opportunity now for people to get into community internet. for people to buy a big pipe, and in fact, I just read an article on it was actually a very interesting article on Ars Technica about a guy whose condo association had wired it, and the challenges, but the advantages and so forth of doing that yourself.
I actually read that article this
It
afternoon.
was fascinating, wasn't it?
Yeah, I read that one too.
Yeah, and it sounded like some ups and downs.
Right.
And you know, the scenario there made it clear that, you know, it wasn't really about the fiber and the fact that there was fiber optic infrastructure so much as the customer service and the competitiveness of the product and the lock-in and the communications.
There's a whole lot of other stuff that you consider in this business besides the pipe.
There is. And you know, the challenges are right-of-way. So, you know, say you have a community and they want to build a community broadband, you know, that community would need the right-of-way.
His assertion is, and maybe he's wrong, but his assertion is that essentially the community owns the copper, because of eminent domain, if nothing else. They granted it to these people, and they could take it back.
Well,
and on top of that, he's saying that they don't use it, so you know a lot of this copper has been turned off.
And companies like Comcast would like to get out of the internet business, you know.
Yeah, I don't know that large incumbent cable or telephone companies would agree with that. You know, they have access to the right of way. They've put in duct. They've filled that duct with cables or fibers, and you know,
a great investment. I mean, thousands of dollars
a
foot to do all that. So
yeah, over many years. You know,
right. So there's so many issues that
where do you
talk
start
about on the internet. When we've talked in the past, and one of the things we've talked about is the pressure. Now, essentially, you have to deal with the incumbent telephone company. They own the copper, and you are providing internet service on top of their pipe. And it's an interesting relationship because they're also selling internet service. You're a competitor.
And for us, there's been a shift from, you know, from 1998 when AT&T launched DSL service in their footprint, and ongoing, we've utilized their DSLAMs. So that means not only the copper, but the electronics on the end of the copper pair and all the inter-office trunking, and then they hand off the customer to us at a mutual meet point.
That's not in the central office? That's not a switch that you put in the central office?
No. So in the legacy DSL, so this is, you know, AT&T 1.53 and 6 megabit ADSL1 services, that all goes into an ATM cloud and is handed off on an OC3 or an OC12.
Somewhere else.
Somewhere else. So we pick up, you know, we cover today 80% of California through big hubs at One Wilshire in LA and at 200 Paul in San Francisco.
That's interesting.
We haul back OC12s
and they
OC3s.
do that because they have to, because the FCC makes them?
So they had to. And that changed.
Ooh.
So during the Bush administration, the idea was to encourage broadband investment by the monopolies by effectively creating a duopoly. So
Cable,
telecom. So consumers would hypothetically have the two choices.
Right.
And, you know, the downside in that is you end up with a sort of competitive truce.
Right.
Where
They collude, let's face it.
well, broadband is, on average, $45 in the U.S.
Right.
And
no matter who you get it from.
One is a little faster, and then maybe the other is a little faster. But there isn't a lot of exciting innovation going on. And internet service providers like Sonic.net had to buy 1.53 and 6 megabit bitstream pipes over this ATM interconnection at the price points dictated by that incumbent,
which somehow always seemed to turn out to be higher than the price the incumbent was charging end users.
Well, there were times when it was lower.
Yeah. But they control it.
And there were times when there was margin.
If they want to squeeze you a little bit,
yes,
they can.
And you know, the thing that I find intriguing about that model is at a given premise, perhaps the speed could be 6 or even 8 megabits, but the wholesale cost inputs were these three products at roughly $5 different between them.
Wow.
So what you end up with is this homogenization. So whether you bought it from Earthlink or DSL Extreme or Sonic.net or AT&T Yahoo, you typically had these 3 or 4 products that were roughly $5 difference between them. And then you had cable. And you know, that was not a vibrant competitive marketplace. So what we've built over the last few years as a telecom So we've become a regulated public utility. We have access to rights of way.
So you're a little different than a traditional ISP.
Yes. So
You're doing what everyone says nobody can do.
we try.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which,
And so, what we've done is put our own equipment. We've leased office space and put our own equipment on the ends of the copper pair. And that gives us control over the product design, the pricing, the technical capabilities. And
so you can do more than 1, 3, and 6 now.
I'm really excited and energized about that. So instead of deploying ADSL1, the technology of the 90s, we've deployed ADSL2 Plus, which is substantially faster. That opens the door to pair bonding, which allows you to double speeds with 2 pairs, and we can deliver POTS voice as well. So we can deliver products that are faster, and then we get to decide what the business model is. And this tiered $5 business model doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
Now, are you still running over the incumbent telecommunication providers' wires, though?
Everyone shares the copper plant.
How do you get access to that?
So
do they charge you for that?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we lease access to the copper wires, and that is a regulatory framework that was created by by Congress in the Telecom Act in 1996. So the 1996 Telecom Act effectively created a competitive marketplace for telecommunication services. Now, I would argue that that marketplace has not exactly succeeded, because consumers in most of America, if they want a landline home phone, they have one phone company to choose from. But that's the framework, and for us, it's working.
And that's different from the old ADSL1.
So
in that you're able to do your own equipment, but the regulatory framework is the same for both.
Well, no. So
okay, that's what.
On the ADSL1, the equipment was the incumbent's equipment. It was their DSLAMs, the DSL access multiplexers, and they were required to sell access to those under a common carriage philosophy. So they're a common carrier. They sell it to internet service providers, who then put internet on top of it and sell it to consumers. And the FCC set that aside.
Right.
And the FCC said, well, in order to encourage further investment, we're going to forbear
We're going to limit
the requirements to, yes.
Yeah.
And so that really pushed us off the precipice and caused us to go and build our own network of DSLAMs.
And that's an unusual direction. Most people just went over the precipice, and that was the end of them.
Yeah, there was a lot of consolidation and a lot of folks exiting the space. But it's exciting to use what's there, that infrastructure, and build something exciting out of it.
So why is, big picture, the internet in the U.S. so sucky? I mean, aren't we like...
The president said in the State of the Union address,
like the
Korea's
worst?
better than us. We need to do something about this.
So why? What's wrong?
We're not the worst. We're in like the middle of the pack.
Well, for me, that's the worst.
Yeah.
It's not great. I don't know.
We should be better.
I don't know what position we're in. It's 43rd or something like that. But yeah, it's pretty sad. And it's a couple factors. And I think that's a great headline to say, well, the internet is not in first place. We created this network, but we're not in first place. And why is that? And, on the one hand, we could point to competitive failure and sort of a broadband duopoly in the U.S., and we could say, well, that's part of the problem. But you can also look at the geography of the country.
We're too spread out?
We're spread out. And so there are some physical limitations where you look at a country like Belgium.
Yeah, right.
And everything is so compact that technically it's possible to deliver more. You look at a country where housing density is very high, like Korea, where you have apartment buildings that are stacked very high.
You can do a great thing. Or Sweden.
And they'll say everyone has fiber, and what that really means is fiber was brought to the basement of that building, and then 430 apartments in the building are connected with copper. And they're connected very quickly because it's a short physical distance. So I think you have to give America a little leeway because we have these sprawling vistas.
But even when you compare the island of Manhattan alone to Korea and Sweden, we don't compare.
And there you'll point to competitive failure. So that's an area where you'd say, well, there is no incentive for investment, and the competition is breaking down. And the countries where you see successful broadband deployment are either government initiatives where the telecommunications company is part of the government and there's a mandate to build that, or areas where there's completely unfettered competition. And so, you look
So we
at
got
some
the
of
worst of both worlds.
and here we have
Yeah.
neither. So
Yeah.
yeah.
We essentially had the government create a duopoly and then not get involved in making it
After that, we're done.
Yes.
We won't get involved. You just did a deal with Google to provide Gigabit to some South Bay
We
houses.
did.
Tell me about that.
We're very excited about that opportunity. So Google announced early last year that it is their intent to build fiber to the home with gigabit broadband speeds to a large number of households. They said 50 to 500,000 individuals.
Yeah, we wanted Petaluma to be.
Petaluma applied.
We applied.
Santa Rosa applied.
We lobbied.
Over 1,000 cities across the U.S. applied, really demonstrating.
Google Kansas applied.
Yeah.
Yes.
I can't remember what their name was. but they
Topeka, I
changed
think,
it.
and they changed it to Google.
They did, and I loved when Google renamed themselves Topeka in response.
Yeah.
I thought that was
nice.
It's only fair. It's a
April,
swap.
April 1st. That was
Yep,
great.
yep.
So Google has not yet announced the city that
I
they have
know.
selected.
They hired Milo Medine to manage it, who's one of the best networking guys I know.
They did.
Yeah.
M2Z
Yeah.
background and
Yeah, he's
former
awesome.
Excited Home fellow. So
Yeah.
I think he's going to
NASA
be a great
engineer.
addition to that team. They have some really bright, dynamic individuals on that team. So their first step in this, they're going to build out an area in Palo Alto.
So it's almost a test.
Yeah, it's, before you go do an entire city, you want to do a little subset of a city and make sure that you've got your ducks in a row. And so that location is in Palo Alto, and they've partnered with Sonic.net to operate that network.
So how will you build out a gigabit residential network?
Well,
Tell us about the technology.
So it's fiber to every home.
To the curb, to the inside,
the premises,
to the
yeah.
garage, where?
So it's the network is, as most networks are, built as fiber along the street
Right.
to points of demarcation adjacent to the property line.
Okay.
And then when a customer
Is there one per house, or are there?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, one per house. And then when a customer elects to take service, then the customer can pay for installation from the property line to the home,
Oh,
or they can do that installation themselves.
get the trencher, Martha. I'm going in.
And you might be surprised in Palo Alto. I don't know.
It'll be interesting to see
Yeah.
what percentage of people
I
go
want to
one
see
way or
Steve
the other.
Jobs with a ditch witch digging in there.
And one of the exciting things about fiber is it is really pretty easy. So if you've got a connector, you can't put it on backwards or
Right,
wrong.
right.
You don't have to strip a wire. There's no green and red.
Right.
There's no untwisting.
Don't you have to have a kind of expensive switch, though? Isn't that kind of pricey, the fiber switches and all that?
So you need a piece of customer premise equipment that
Like
takes
a
in...
CSU, DSU or something? Or what do you...
Yes,
yeah.
basically. So the fiber
Showing my
equivalent...
age.
fiber
You need a modem. I think you need a modem.
Leo's referring to
into that.
a T1 channel service unit. So, yes, you need a CPE that takes in the fiber and that outputs gigabit Ethernet. And so that is supplied as part of the setup kit. And then consumers
cool.
plug their...
It's like a big orange line going across the lawn there.
That's actually one concern that I have, is that people will say, we're going to self-install that.
Right.
And it'll show up on a Friday afternoon. They'll literally just run the thing out across the lawn and plug in. And,
It works.
So
It's working great until it rains. I don't know.
You know, the
we
rain
should
will-
show you the sand line, because there is an orange wire taped to the ceiling in this room somewhere. I don't know where it is.
well, the concern would be mowing the lawn
Right.
on Sunday afternoon.
You can't step on it. It's glass.
Well, it'll be in a conduit, and
Okay.
so it's a rigid conduit that'll protect it.
So what's the carrying capacity of that little fiber thing there?
Well, it's fiber, so as fast
It's
as
infinite, basically.
as fast as you want to spend on
You
electronics.
can't get any faster.
It'll be set up as gigabit.
Gigabit. Okay. Yeah. And so there's a little customer device, a box in the garage, and then what do? Ethernet to the rest of the house, or?
Yeah, so the customer will plug in their machine. Neither Google.
They have a router
well,
next to the.
So a router will be available as an option, and
It
so
should be a gigabit router.
and it's a gigabit router.
Yeah.
It's got 802.11n, so you can do You can do Wi-Fi throughout the home.
And they'll probably need Cat 6 cables too.
You can do
5e.
Gigabit over Cat 5e.
Cat 5e would work. Yeah, right.
And
So,
but we're not going to run wire inside of people's homes.
That's up.
They would need to hire a local electrical.
You know, it's funny. So now you got a gigabit, and you're surfing your way to websites that are lucky to have 10 megabits. I mean, you're faster than a lot of the places you're going, aren't you?
Well, it depends on the resources. So, a lot of the places that we go today, it's Apple or it's Google or it's Yahoo. It's some well-connected major enterprise. And so I would expect people will see very high performance to those sorts of sites.
Right.
But clearly there are tons of sites on the internet that are hanging off the end of a T1.
I've never been on a gigabit Ethernet. Does, like, when you go to YouTube, do the videos just go boom and play?
They're gorgeous.
Really?
Leo,
They load right away?
Oh, high definition. Well, and actually, the idea is to go to this 4x high def.
Right.
So instead of 1080p,
It's 4K.
it's 4K, and so that's
How much bandwidth is a 4K video? It's a lot.
well, yeah, theoretically, a reasonable, like a broadcast quality 1080 is about 22, 23 megabits.
Right.
So
before
four times
that.
100 megabit.
100 megabits. Wow. But you still have plenty with a gigabit.
Yeah.
You got room.
Yeah.
Are you worried that people with gigabit connections are going to start having servers in their basement? And I mean,
it's a good question. What are people
I
going to do
could
with
run
it?
a TV studio out of the basement. If I had a gigabit, I'm set.
Yes. I mean, it's a valid question. I don't know what people are going to do with these connections, and I think
If you're watching this video right now, the video is streaming to you through a SonicNet EFM connection, which is, because of our distance from the CO, is about 9 megabits. If we get
10,
close,
yeah.
10. If we get closer, it'll be more, right?
Well, actually, it's 10 because that's what you're paying for.
Oh, we could get more.
Yes.
Okay. 10's plenty. I just want to say 10 megabits symmetric up and down is enough for us to do all 4 of our Skypes on Skypeosaurus, send all our streams out. We send out 5 different streams to 5 different providers. Actually, 2 high, 2 low, 2 high, 2. Anyway, 5 streams. It's plenty.
Yeah, gigabit's a lot.
Gigabit's 10 times that.
It's ridiculously large, and
Wait a minute.
you also
a gigabit's 1,000 times that. Wait a minute. We have 10,
100 times.
100. That's
Yes.
it. I knew it was in there. 100 times more.
It's ridiculously fast, and PCs and laptops don't go a gigabit.
Right.
The
newer
network,
ones do, though.
Well,
Yeah.
it's not that the interface isn't capable.
Oh.
It's that
The I/O.
the I/O can't go that fast. 802.11n doesn't go that fast.
Right.
So, realistically, the idea is to remove the bottleneck in the last mile, and then allow what happens in the home to happen over time. And what you'll see is people literally have 100 megabit LANs, or they have 802.11 B.
Right.
And over time, people will upgrade those things, and they'll move their LAN to gigabit, and they'll move their applications.
Is it
up.
symmetric gigabit or no?
It is symmetric.
Do you now? But
I
want to go Leo's really there. Excited.
I would like to move there now.
I would like to be there.
Petaluma is great, though.
But
Petaluma's, we're not going to ever have anything like that here. What are you talking about?
We're building in Sebastopol.
I know you are. They're actually building a residential gigabit in the town of Sebastopol, right?
We haven't committed to the speed.
Ah,
so you might.
But it'll be fiber. I should say fiber.
Yes,
yeah.
And so we'll make some sort of splash when we announce the speed that we're delivering.
When you have that much speed, do you worry about how people are going to use it, or how much they're going to use it, or do you be like, you know what, you can use as much as you want?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I mean, you got a TV station in the basement.
Yeah. Is that a problem if everybody started doing a TV station in their basement and pumping up?
Ask me in 6 months.
Yeah.
Okay.
The question is, are people going to change their usage behaviors because they have a big pipe? And what I can tell you is, when somebody buys a 1.5 megabit connection or buys a 20 megabit connection from us, their consumption, it's larger on the bigger connection, but it isn't proportionately larger.
Mm-hmm.
We still sit down and watch the same Netflix shows.
Right.
Or we still download the same OS updates. We consume a similar amount of content. And so it's just, how fast does it get to you? So that's the big picture idea.
You're watching Ask the ISP. Do you ever do anything like that? You should, because there's a lot of, I mean, I'm thinking we got to talk about IPv6. We got to talk about BitTorrent and bandwidth hogs, because you just raised that issue. And how do you handle that? The RIA, when they email you, what do you do? There's a lot to, ISPs are kind of the front line these days of what's happening on the internet.
Yeah, understanding what you do is key for me being able to explain tech news to people in my audience.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'll give the chat room a chance. If you have questions to ask the ISP, Dane Jasper is here. He is the founder and are you the president? Is that your official title of
CEO?
CEO of Sonic.
We have people starting to put in requests for the
I want
can Mainville, Ohio, please get.
Yeah, and that's we've seen a lot of that when we announced our partnership with Google.
Everybody wants that.
We got a big influx of requests.
One of the things Bob Frankston said is, people talk a lot about this high bandwidth stuff, but really, if you just use the copper well, it's plenty for most people. A megabit. Look, a T1 was 1.5 megabits, and we were happy. I still have a COVAD in here.
I got rid of my 1.5 megabits when I started doing a lot of online gaming and video streaming.
Well, latency is another issue.
I was perfectly fine with it.
So latency and jitter are a separate issue from overall bandwidth, but that's part of the network picture too.
It is, and I think, to your point, there is a lot of life left in copper.
Okay.
And, we're excited about fiber. We're excited about what Google's building and our partnership with them, what we're building. But, that's the next generation. Today, you can do a lot with copper. And setting aside ADSL1 and moving forward to ADSL2+, to VDSL2, pair bonding, vectoring, dynamic spectrum management, phantom vectoring. There's a whole series of technologies ahead for copper that are very exciting.
But you're sort of
in other words,
an exception.
I'm not dead yet.
Yeah, right.
No.
I don't feel like we see a lot of Sonic nets out there. Am I just unaware of them?
We have some regional peers. I went to an event at the Federated Internet Service Providers Association, FISPA, in St. Louis in Louisiana recently.
Oh, you must have met Jerry Scroggin there.
We had the crawfish boil.
Did you meet Jerry?
No.
He owns Bayou Internet and Communications.
Maybe I did.
You probably did.
I may have. He would definitely.
I'll tell you why he's in the news. He has a tiny ISP in Louisiana. He's got 10,000 customers. The family of Frank Zappa is mad at some of his customers in the Recording Industry Association of America. And he says, if the RIA wants my help, they better bring their checkbook because it's going to cost me money, and I ain't going to do it. I asked for their billing address, Scroggin said. Usually I never hear back. That's one way to fight the RIA.
So in other words, they're coming after customers on his network.
They send him the subpoenas.
Downloading files illegally, and he's like, I'm not doing anything.
Where's the money? Show me the money.
Yeah, the concern there is it takes time and energy to chase this down.
How many RIAA letters do you get a day or once a week?
We have not to date seen a lawsuit. In other words, we have not seen RIA or the Motion Picture Association sue one of our customers.
Okay.
What we see day in and day out is DMCA takedowns.
Right.
And it's sort of an improper use of the DMCA. The idea with a takedown is a service provider is given a notice that says, take this content off your servers.
It's violating my copyright.
Yeah, and it's take it off the ISP's servers.
Right.
Now, we're providing a connection to an end user. It's on their machine.
You're a carrier.
And do you provide web hosting services?
We do. And so in that case, it would be a takedown from our own servers.
Gotcha.
So we would need to respond to that. But what we see more typically is a customer, they're on BitTorrent or something like that. They're sharing content. And so we're not being asked for that person's identity. We're being asked to take the content down. And we can't turn off the person's connection. And our only concern...
And you don't really have access to their hard drive to take the stuff off.
So we're not the appropriate party
right.
to receive the takedown. The end user is.
Right.
But
do you say that?
No way of them knowing who the end user is.
Right.
And but the next step would be for them to sue the end user, to find out who they are, and to pursue damages.
Right.
So what we do is we take that notice and we forward it on to the customer as a courtesy.
Most ISPs do that. You'll get that mail.
Yes. And well, ISPs take different tacks on it. So some ISPs say, strike one, you're a bad user,
right.
and we're going to turn you off.
Right.
And we're definitely seeing a movement in Europe towards codification of those sort of 3 strikes rules.
Right.
And our tack on it is, you probably didn't know that your son was doing X, and maybe you should take him out to the woodshed and have a word with him. So we're not presuming guilt on the part of our customer so much as giving them a warning that the next thing might be a lawsuit.
And so far, that's been effective. You haven't had any lawsuits.
Correct.
Yeah, that's good news. Must be tough, though. That's a lousy position to be put in. It's like somebody suing the Postal Service for a threatening letter. It's like, come on, I'm just a carrier. That would be your defense. I'm a common carrier.
Yeah, so we wouldn't be sued. They would sue the end user as a doe, and then they would subpoena us for the identity. And we would go to the customer and say, well, we've been subpoenaed for this. Do you want to retain counsel? And
let's talk about bandwidth hog. Comcast and others say we got to have caps, 250 gigabyte a month caps. It's, all the wireless carriers do it. And they've done other things. They've run those servers that look for BitTorrent and disconnect them and things like that. How do you handle that?
So you mentioned Comcast and wireless carriers, and the reason that those two entities need to do this is that they have a shared network infrastructure. So from the perspective of a wireless carrier, you've got a certain amount of spectrum and an antenna pointed in a certain direction, and it has a certain number of total megabits of capacity that you have to share between a bunch of subscribers. In the same way, in a cable network, you have a neighborhood, and it might be 500 homes, 5,000 homes that's served by one uplink, and that's a shared piece of capacity. And so there is a natural need for some sort of behavior modification on the part of the service provider to discourage what they would call excessive use of that resource. The idea is the resource is finite, it has a certain cost to it, and they want to maximize the revenue per bit. And changing people's behaviors is a way for them to do that.
I think that's an important point that a lot of people don't realize, which is there's plenty of bandwidth on the internet in general. Where there are problems is situations like what you're describing.
Local problems.
Yeah, basically. And so the way that cable companies deal with this, so their network, it's an HFC, a hybrid fiber coaxial network. So you have fiber going to a node in the neighborhood, and then coax serving a node that is 500 to 5,000 homes. So the way that they add bandwidth is node splits. So they create two nodes out of one. So one northbound, one southbound. Now you got twice as much bandwidth. But each time they do that, it costs money. And so the fight is, how does a cable company justify those sort of upgrades when maybe they could just flog the people who are downloading a lot of video, which competes with the cable company's desire to deliver you all your video anyway. So there's sort of a...
So how does a DSL provider like you, or so you're not, there's no, but it's always shared somewhere, isn't it?
It's shared in a location where upgrades are cost-effective and easy.
Got it.
So because we have a dedicated pipe to each home, there isn't any shared congestion.
So it's back at the switch, the congestion
Back
happens.
at the central office, we've got all dark fiber.
Right.
So all we have to do is add
Slide
more. You go from 1 gig to 10 gig to 40 gig to dense wave division. And
earlier you said that fiber really has no theoretical maximum, right? So is that just meaning that you can also wait on developments in new electronics to take advantage of that?
Yeah. So basically today, you want to connect two sites at gigabit with fiber. That's really inexpensive. 10 gigabit costs a bit more. And then you get into wave division multiplexing. And so you can divide that up 8 ways, 16 ways, 32 ways. And then over each of those, you can drive 10, 40. Now they've got 100 gig. So at the really top end of the technology today, you could spend millions of dollars per end on, dense wave division multiplexing systems that are very high bandwidth with transceivers that are very high bandwidth. So that's the constraint, is just an economic one. And then those systems keep getting faster and faster.
Right.
Bits are pretty cheap, though.
Well, and then the other side is transit to the internet. So, the issues are
last mile. You can have the pipe, but you have to pay somebody for the stuff you're getting on that pipe.
So there's last mile, which is customer premise to point of aggregation. And so in that hybrid fiber network, that's a shared network. In a wireless network, it's shared. In a DSL network, it's constrained by distance. You've experienced those challenges.
Yeah, right.
And so in each of these, we're iterating over the technology to improve it, whether it's with bonding and vectoring in DSL or node splits and DOCSIS 3 in cable. So that's the last mile, or from the customer's perspective, the first mile. And then there's the middle mile, which is the point of aggregation, which in a telecom network is the central office. In a coaxial network, it's from the node onwards. So that middle mile bandwidth, and that has some cost. that cost could be very high in a very rural area where you had to trench up, hundreds of miles of Route 66 to lay some fiber from A to B. In a more metro area, that middle mile will be much more cost effective. And then at the core, there's transit. So that's connections to the internet and all of those resources. And at the major interconnection points, a lot of that is peering today. And so we interconnect directly with entities like YouTube and Google and and Yahoo. And
so you don't just interconnect with a backbone and then rely on them to bring you everything.
So the idea is you interconnect with lots of different folks, and that drives down all those costs. And the cost of internet transit, what you're buying that you can't peer off has just been plummeting over the years.
Is peering basically almost free, right? It's a relationship more than a financial.
So that's the idea. Is that two entities might be paying someone for transit to get to each other, and if they're at a common physical point, they can just run a port between them and skip that.
Right.
And it saves everybody money.
Right.
When you were doing ADSL in the 90s, were you providing a connection from the telecommunication company and to interconnect with backbones and doing peering, or were you letting them handle all of that as well?
No. So we ran all of the sort of layer 3 upwards. So they ran the physical plant, layer 1, the copper itself. They ran layer 2, which is the DSLAMs and ATM network that interconnect the central offices, and then they would hand that off to us as a layer 2 connection, and then we would put IP on that and do all of the interconnection to the internet.
So you've been doing peering for a long time.
Yeah.
What is your perspective on the level 3 Comcast dispute? And just to set it up for anybody in the audience who doesn't know, level 3 accuses Comcast of unfairly charging them to deliver content to their customers. Comcast says level 3 is acting like a CDN, a content distribution network, by signing a deal with Netflix and then trying to pass it off as peering and not have to pay.
It's a really intriguing situation, and it turns the entire model on its head. The idea is I'm an internet service provider, and I have end users who want content, and how can I get that content at the lowest possible cost? And ideally, I would do that by peering with the person who's generating that content. If I couldn't peer with them, it would come in over transit, and I would be paying something for that. Now, what's happened with Comcast is a reversal of that. And what they've done is, if you want to deliver your content to Comcast customers, you have to pay Comcast for the port to get into their network. And so what was happening was Netflix was working with Akamai, who was buying from Comcast this big interconnection port to terminate the traffic to Comcast customers who were requesting it. And so Comcast was monetizing not only the customer connection side of the relationship, but also the incoming traffic, which, that was sort of a dirty secret nobody knew about that has been brought to light by this. And so what happened with the level 3 situation was level 3, who had free peering with Comcast, started dumping all this Netflix traffic over that. And Comcast said, no, we don't want that. And unfortunately, if you want to dump that much traffic, their transit connections are through a carrier which apparently has some congestion. And so the allegation, and I don't have any inside information, so I can't speak to the veracity of this, but the allegation is you have to pay to play, otherwise you're sent down the slow lane.
And level 3, as I understand it, even offered to buy more connections in the racks. They're like, you don't have enough ports, we'll buy more ports. We'll pay for that. Just let us send the traffic as part of the peering arrangement. And Comcast said, no, we won't accept that.
Well, and it's interesting because the big shift here is that the consumer is now the hostage and the source of power, whereas it used to be the content was the source of power. So if you had the content, you were king,
right?
And you would hold that back and you would charge for it.
Now it's the people who have us as their customers who are in charge because they have the eyeballs.
So exactly. So what's happening now is that the worry is that service providers will get so big that they can dictate the terms at which content can reach those customers.
And it gets even worse when Comcast owns NBC, and then they have both.
Well,
Yes, both ends of that. Yeah.
And both ends of that.
I think what troubles me about it is that if Comcast wanted to tell Level 3, look, you have to pay, and Level 3 said, fine, we're not going to pay, and Comcast said, fine, nobody on our network is going to get Netflix traffic.
Guess who wins there, yeah.
Where do the customers go? Because the way that should play out is the customers would decide, well, is Netflix important to me? I'm going to go to another ISP.
But we've seen these battles with television. You know, that's what the Fox battle was. That's what, you know, was going on in with Cablevision.
Yeah, right.
And the way that those battles always end up
We
is
get
that
screwed.
a little more money comes out of the consumer's pocket.
Right.
So what would happen there is, you know, say Level 3 and Akamai are competing for the Netflix business. And Akamai is willing to pay Comcast to get in. And Level 3 says, no, we're not willing to participate in that.
Right.
Well, then Netflix says, we've got to get to our customers. So we're going to go with the other.
We go with Akamai.
Right.
And we charge you $1 more.
And Akamai might hypothetically charge them more than Level 3 is. And, you know, that's obviously why Level 3 won the deal.
Right.
And then Netflix would raise their rates.
Right.
And so it ends up coming out of the consumer's
But that's
pocket.
what's frustrating because we pay both ways. We are already paying for the internet access.
Isn't that frustrating?
Well, what are you going to do about it? Come on, you're an ISP. Help me.
Well, and, you know, here's the logical carry-on to that concerns me is that a large service provider will insist that the content provider pay them to get into their network with the content. So
Because they have a lot of eyeballs. They
have a lot of eyeballs. So say that they're getting $45 from the customer for your internet access.
Right.
And then they're getting $3 from Akamai. Now they've got more revenue for the total customer. But a smaller service provider like us says, hey guys, could we have a nickel?
No.
And Akamai and Netflix say, no, you're lucky we'll give you peering.
Yeah.
So
be grateful you got our
So then how does a small service provider remain competitive when a large service provider not only is charging the customer for their access, but then is being subsidized with additional fees to terminate content?
That traffic can get there anyway by being transited elsewhere.
Yes.
But the problem is because we're talking about Netflix streaming video. If we were just talking about a website, it might not be as much of an issue.
The allegation is that the other path, the transit path, and Comcast's primary transit path is through Tata, that path is congested. And so the allegation is that if you don't pay to play, you get in, the content gets to the customers, but not in a way that the customers could view videos from Netflix. It would be buffering.
Right.
You know, and that's
what's Tata?
They're an international carrier of bandwidth.
They actually just bought Big Gravity. So,
well, I've read
if you're watching us on Big Gravity, you know what Tata is. You're watching.
You didn't know it, but you did.
Yeah.
because I've read that there's conspiracy theories that Comcast keeps the Tata interconnections congested. I don't know if that's true or not. But
that is the theory that folks have put out there, and like I said, I don't have direct information, so I can't speak.
It's a difficult situation because this isn't something where an end user could say, "Well, good, we'll just do community internet. We don't have to worry about it." It doesn't get fixed by that. It's a hugely interdependent system.
Right. So that's the concern: is that the end user is hostage.
Yeah.
The content provider can change how they get to the end user. So Netflix could buy from Akamai or someone else. But the end user might only have one or two choices of broadband provider. And so if their broadband provider is engaging in those sort of tactics, there isn't going to be a good
There's no recourse
way around that.
I've seen a lot of people say that what should happen is that the internet pathways should be regulated like highways. And not necessarily nationalized, but
I would nationalize
common carrier provision put in place saying if you're running pipes, you have to let people on. Would you support that? Because you're starting to run your own pipes now.
We are. So I have mixed
So you're in
feelings
that position where it's like, wait a minute, I paid for these pipes.
Right. And if you were to ask me that 5 or 10 years ago, I would have said, yes, it should be a completely open network. Now that we're building network, you say, well, we built this asset, so maybe we'd like to monetize that asset. Now, the concern I think that consumers should have is that they only have a couple choices. And so the question is, how do we foster more choices?
Right. Competition solves the net neutrality debate by giving you a choice.
Exactly.
But we're not there. I mean, I don't know if we're ever going to get there.
The question isn't to me about net neutrality. It's how do we get competition?
Right. So competition solves many problems. It solves this Comcast, Netflix, Tata situation.
Because you have a choice.
Because consumers have a choice. And
yeah, but nobody wants to be, we're the internet service provider that doesn't have Netflix. So it wouldn't last long. I guess that's the idea, right? Is that?
But where am I going to go?
Well, now there's no choice.
Yeah.
But let's say there's 5 internet service providers.
That's right.
Then
and the idea is if there's 5, they're all kept honest.
Right.
So if there's 5, your customer could leave, so you can't engage in shenanigans.
Right.
Unless you come up with a way to lock them into 2-year contracts.
that would be a good idea.
Now you're talking. Service. Chat room. Any other questions for Mr.
Well, I was going to see. Do you have an idea of how we foster more competition? Since you're one of the people that's going out there and laying the cable. Can more companies do that? Can more enterprises start like that? And
they can. And around the country there are small competitive service providers. Unfortunately, not nearly as many as there used to be.
Yeah.
And so bumper sticker on the back of the car, or whatever, support your local ISP.
Right. I'm with you on that.
I think that is important, that consumers support competitive service providers. Unfortunately, technologically, there often isn't competition, and somebody needs to step up and build that. And
it's expensive, though. It's a lot of capital, right?
It is. So that's what we're doing in the Bay Area, and we're going to continue that. But we're not seeing that in every market, and so unfortunately, consumers aren't going to have choices everywhere.
We need more Danes.
More Danes. IPv6. Are you ready for the apocalypse? It's coming soon.
The iPocalypse?
The iPocalypse.
Yes.
Maybe November.
We're going to run out
September.
of IPv4 addresses on the granting end any day now.
Yeah.
There's only like 18 million left.
I think there's only 1 or 2 /8s that are going to be granted here in the next couple of weeks. That doesn't mean we run out of addresses, but it means that all the addresses have been handed out to the people who can use them.
So we've been doing IPv6 for a number of years. So all of our customers are offered obscenely large blocks of IPv6 addresses and have been for years. And we've seen in the last few weeks a lot of customers experimenting with our v6 offering and sort of playing around with it. I think it's going to be a long, long time before customers aren't given a v4 address. And that is really when the apocalypse, from my perspective,
because your router
strikes.
doesn't support it. Does your network support it? I mean, how?
So we've offered for years Ipv6 tunnels. So this is 6 in 4 is the way that this is termed.
So the router doesn't have to be changed.
Exactly. So we support v6 via 6 in 4 today, and that's something. We got a nice letter from a developer at Apple 4 or 5 years ago that said, the only reason the airport supports v6 is that Sonic is the only service provider that offers it.
Wow.
Going back then. So we've done that for a long time. But the big shift will happen when someone isn't given a v4 address. It's not
right.
You've got v6 addresses and there happen to be some v6 resources out there. It's you only have a v6 address.
Right.
So what can you get to? And today,
nothing.
it's virtually nothing.
Right.
And so I think that what we're going to see is the long, long stretching of v4 addresses. And you mentioned NAT earlier in our conversation.
That was one way we stretched it.
And what you'll see is carrier-grade NAT. So instead of NAT at the premise, you'll see NAT in the network. And, that is a kind of scary and ugly situation. But, I think realistically we're going to see that for decades to come.
And I've heard the more aggressive recycling of IPv4 addresses. So that if somebody is not using all of their blocks, they can sell them back and have them reassigned.
Yeah, the idea is, there'll be a recouping of unused address space, sort of a reckoning.
Yeah.
A day of reckoning around the squatting.
Give me that back.
Are you using that? Are you going to finish that /8? Give me what's left.
That's right. And so, service providers will be looking for address space everywhere they can find it. And, the explosion in mobile devices and, how many connected devices do people have in their pockets and in their homes today? That's just growing without bound. And it's solved at the edge with NAT, but it needs to be solved in the core with more address space, and clearly it'll create problems.
So we'll see providers on the exits with cardboard signs.
Yeah, got some spare address space. I actually got a phone call from somebody trying to hawk a /16, I think.
Really?
Wow. Yeah, he called me. What would this be worth if I had a /16?
So if I were to, fell off a truck, I don't know.
Slip you a little money.
Yeah, and I think you can't buy address space, but you could acquire the entity which had the address space.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
and,
right.
So I told him to wait a few years, and it might be worth something.
Hold on to it. It's like gold.
Well, yeah, it's worth very little now, but it could be a scarce resource in future.
Yeah.
But they're also not using it, and so they have this shell entity that has no devices connected to it. So that would be the first.
So there's probably a mine of those. So that's why I think we're not going to suddenly this summer, run out of IPv4 and nobody will be able to use, nobody will be able to add websites anymore. What's going to happen is there's going to be more and more creative ways, like you're talking about. I didn't even think about NAT being run at the ISP level.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
that actually makes sense.
I think you could stretch it for quite a long time.
Yeah. I think realistically, I have to say I'm in the camp that we're never going to end up in V6.
Oh, interesting.
Oh, really?
And that might be a bit of a sort of incendiary position to take, but I just don't see how it can happen. Like, there are so many V4 resources that have to be reachable forever, far corners of the world.
Yeah.
And, I think we'll see a lot of V6 at the edge where, folks are given V6 addresses, but then those translate to V4 addresses. In order to reach all the resources they have to. And this stuff, it's going to be stretched for decades, and we're going to end up in a hybrid internet of V4 and V6 muddled together.
That seems like it might be likely.
You know what? There's still so many things.
You're winning me over here.
I wanted to talk to Dane about, but we're out of time. So come back, will you? I mean, you're just up the road a piece. So
I am.
I'd love to get you back in here.
Happy to sit down with you.
Dane Jasper is the CEO of SonicNet, Sonic.net. If you want to know more, ADSL2, can you get it from SonicNet now?
Yeah, we're selling our Fusion broadband and phone service throughout the greater San Francisco Bay Area. It is broadband at up to 20 megabit per copper pair, with pair bonding offering up to 40, and local landline phone service with local and nationwide and caller ID and voicemail and all the features you want. And it's $39.95 a month.
You've really grown as a business. I mean, now you're a telco. It's amazing.
It's exciting, and this product, we just launched this in August, and last month we grew 7-8% in a single month. So we're in a
There's a market for it.
Yeah, I think we've struck on a product that's very exciting.
That's really neat. Well, thank you, Dane, for coming in here, and we got to talk about getting you wanted to put a spy cam in the new building.
Yeah, I was looking at the rafters in your little.
Yeah, it'd be perfect.
I think hang it from the rafters. It'll be out of the way of the construction
People
guys.
can watch. We've already done a lot of demo. We're actually almost done with the demo, believe it or not, which means we're going to start construction pretty soon. So we'll have to figure out a way to do that. You're doing some wireless, aren't you? Is that no?
A little, but we don't like wireless very much.
Really?
Yeah, it's challenging. It's roofs, it's weather, rain.
RF is kind of a black art. It's not.
And then there's interference.
Yeah.
So wireless is challenging. And there's a lot of vibrancy in the wireless ISP space. It's something consumers should explore. Is there a WISP in their area?
Okay.
But it's now that we've gone to being a telecom and now building fiber, I don't want to look back.
Yeah, you want the hard wire. Dane Jasper, Sonic.net. Thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. We're going to get out of the way because This Week in Radio Tech is coming up. We thank you for joining us. By the way, very popular subject. It's interesting. Sometimes we do the big thinker stuff, and sometimes people just want to know, how can I get a faster internet connection into my house? So come back again soon, and we'll talk more.
I appreciate it.
Really appreciate your time. Thank you, Tom Merritt.
Of course.
You got a little under the weather. I hear a little raspy.
I feel fine. I just got
got
cold
a little frog in there.
I'm going to do some Barry White.
Baby. We are now putting these things on the internet. Hey, what a thought. What a concept. What an idea. If you go to twit.tv/TRI, we've actually turned this sucker into a podcast. The first one is already up. Warren Spector interview we did a few weeks ago.
You mean Netcast?
I'm sorry, Netcast. Did I say the P word? You will be able to listen soon, I think. I think we're going to rush these out faster than once a week because we have about 8 already in the can.
Yeah. So we'll get it so where we're
Michael Geist is next
when you get back from your
yeah. Get it. You know what? I'll be gone for a little bit. Get it up to speed. Jerry Ellsworth is following Michael Geist, and we have so many more, including Woz and so many more. Bob Frankston from last week, and of course Dane's at the bottom of the queue. We got to hurry up, get him out there. Thank you everybody for being here. We'll see you next time on Triangulation.